All right. Hello. I'm Clay Donnelly. I'm Vice President of Sales here at Flowable, and we've got a really exciting presentation this morning. We've got a lot to live up to based on if anybody joined this morning's early sessions. Rob Koplowitz and Paul Holmes-Higgins were talking about Kindred Credit Union and what they were going to talk about a little bit today and how exciting that use case is. So hopefully, Tim and Jeff, when you go through, we probably got a lot of folks on the line here. They're going to ask a ton of questions, but like I said, it's my pleasure to introduce everyone here to Kindred Credit Union. We're really excited to have Kindred Credit Union as one of our customers in North America, and especially happy to have them presenting here at FlowFest'23. Without disclosing too much information about the presentation here today, I believe they're going to be discussing a case study of how they've utilized Flowable within their organization. Right? And joining us here today from Kindred Credit Union is Tim Dick, who is a technical architect at Kindred Credit Union. Tim is responsible for designing the structure of new software and data systems and provides technical guidance, support, and standard settings for the development team. And starting out the presentation today for Kindred Credit Union will be Jeff Perttula. He is an enterprise systems analyst at Kindred Credit Union. Jeff is responsible for management of the enterprise systems and overall data model at Kindred Credit Union. So again, really excited to have the folks here from Kindred Credit Union on the line with us. Please feel free to submit any questions you have during the presentation, and keep in mind that questions will be answered at the end of the presentation by the team, Jeff and Tim here, the team at Kindred Credit Union. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, Jeff, and I'll let you get started with the presentation.
All right, thanks, Clay. Appreciate the introduction. So give you a bit of a background about Kindred to start with. We are a credit union operates in Canada. We're just a little bit west of Toronto. We've been around since 1964. And one of the things that sort of differentiates us is our membership base is typically a little bit more rural, a little more agricultural based, and a little bit more focused on small business banking. So that puts us in the 10th largest credit union in the province, and we're 32nd by size and asset size in Canada. So what we're going to talk about here today is basically give you an understanding of kind of where we've gone with our 3-year sort of engagement with Flowable. We're just into our 4th year of using the platform, and sort of what we've tried to do, what we've been successful at, and maybe some of the things that didn't work well for us, and where to sort of maybe allow for you guys to learn from what we've experienced and navigate some of those pitfalls maybe a little bit cleaner than we did. But I want to try to provide some insights to give you guys a little less friction in your own experiences, and maybe highlight some of the things that we've had success in doing in our experiencing our development process with Flowable. So this is all coming about. We found 3 years ago, there's this sort of global phenomenon or incident, I guess, with COVID-19 coming along. And we had originally an organizational focus for digitization and automation. And then all of a sudden the pandemic came along, and that got accelerated very quickly. We were forced to serve members, or our clients, we refer to them as members, because in order to do business with us, you have to be a member of the credit union. So we had a need to service them more efficiently and in non-traditional interactions. So there's a lot of more digital-based, non-face-to-face, because we had a lot of times where we had limited availability in terms of branch hours and even just the capacity to interact with people face-to-face. So all of this developed sort of a capacity strain within our organization, because we only have so many developers. We wanted to get all these things out there to serve our members the best that we could. But it was a big change, and we needed to find a way to implement that without sort of having a significant strain or causing too much stress on our development team. So what we ended up doing is we created a group of people, a new staff role that we defined as a Kindred Workflow Designer. And then fundamentally, the group of them, we kind of refer to them as our Kindred Workflow Designer group. And that's sort of a peer-to-peer group there where everybody can kind of share their experiences, their knowledge, and work together as a team to enhance the knowledge that they've captured as part of their learning process. And the whole goal was to ensure that we have our business process experts doing the design work. So we're kind of taking away the knowledge transfer to the development team and having the people that know the processes innately do the flowable design work for us. And so we'll talk a little bit more about our group and the designers a little bit further along. But we're gonna next up talk about our before picture and sort of what we originally had as our process design and development. So originally what would happen is the business subject matter expert would submit a request to our development team and say, hey, this is what we'd like to do. And then from there, we would prioritize and schedule these development within our organizational priorities and align that to our strategy, and also kind of mesh that with our development team resources. So from there, the software developer would then work with the business subject matter expert to kind of understand what the problem is, understand the request, and then what that process is going to look like in order to digitize it. The developer would then utilize Flowable and create any new APIs that are required to enhance that process or make it work, and then pass that back to the business person to do the acceptance testing to make sure that what we built actually aligned with what they needed, and then from there we'd create a change through our change management process. We deploy it to our production environment. We've switched that up a little bit now with our citizen developers. So now, rather than the business subject matter experts pushing to the development team, they submit the request within their own functional unit for prioritization. So now we're saying, it might be something that our lending team wants to do. Well, that priority is established within the lending team first, and they're going to bubble up the most appropriate things first. And then from there, it then meshes into the organizational priorities with our strategic team. And the interesting thing here is that because often the business subject matter expert on the process is the workflow designer, we mitigate a lot of communication that needs to occur in order to get this operationalized. So then what happens is they just get started. The business process or the business subject matter expert and the designer, often same person, sometimes they're not, but they will often work closely together within the same teams. And they'll start to create all the workflow steps, the user interface forms, the branching logic, or configure any API calls into our core systems of record, like our banking system or CRM or document repository system or any other core system that we have available. At that point, if there is any additional API development that's required, the workflow designer would take that to our development team and say, hey, we're missing this. Can we have a developer put together an API to provide this information? At that point in time, the developer or our software developers would then go out, build that API interface and hand it back and configure it within a service registry task in Flowable, and then say back to the designer that it's ready to go, and they can now configure it for use in their process. Then, much like before, if everything's ready to go, then we do user acceptance testing. So one of the things that we make sure that we do here, though, is we decouple the person doing the design work and the person doing the user acceptance testing. So it'll be done by somebody in the business unit, a business subject matter expert, but it wouldn't be the person that does the workflow design, just to make sure that we have good development processes in place. And then finally, if that works well, then everything passes, we go to change management, and we deploy it to production. So now kind of go back to our workflow designers group and the reason why we created it. because we had a whole bunch of people in different areas of the business developing. And now at this point in time, I think we've got about 15 or so designers across all different areas of our business. So you've got people in, you can see on the screen here, there's people in audit, there's people in IT, there's people in member services. So it basically any area, any department within our organization has flowable expertise in design now. But it was somewhat siloed because they were all working in different departments. There wasn't a lot of crossover. So we found that in order to optimize the process, we really wanted to make sure that there was a regular touch point with everybody so that we could have shared processes. Also spotlighting the work that we're doing in there, because oftentimes, lending doesn't know what investments is doing, and audit and risk doesn't know what the training team are doing. So by having these monthly calls where everybody's there and has an opportunity to share and ask questions, it really sort of helped to break down those barriers and really establish a sort of a peer support network within the groups of people that are doing the development. And then the other big component of this group is sort of collaboratively developing sort of strategies and methodologies that make sense for, say, our non-traditional development team. The designers are not necessarily the most technical people, so we have to make sure that we're building out our best practices to meet their needs as well as the organizational needs. So this is where there's a lot of discussion and feedback to make sure that the approach that we're taking aligns with the business need and also their expectations. So kind of give you a couple examples of what we've done, or rather what our designers have done independently of our IT team for the most part. Talk about some of the things like that are daily processes, something our ATM balancing. So every day we use a process to balance our ATM transactions. Any new investment, new GIC or term deposit or time deposit, depending on where you are, they all call it something different, but it all is very much the same thing. Every new term deposit or GIC is now created through a flowable workflow. Any new membership and our getting to know you or customer questionnaire is all done through a flowable process. And this is all created by our functional business teams. They build these workflows to service their needs. And so some of these things, like last couple of minutes, our call center tracking is call into our call center, somebody picks it up, and as we're redirecting it to the proper person, we're actually calling, or we're identifying why you called in and how we passed it off. That takes 30 seconds to a minute. And then our credit watch list workflow, that could be years. So we've got different processes that are modeled here that have lots of different volumes and utilizations. So it's not just one size fits all. Sorry. So this is actually an example of one of our workflows that was designed in Flowable by our lending team. It's our watch list account workflow. Just want to highlight a couple of things here. One of the things that came out of our best practices for our designers group is this color coding of our processes. So you can see here, everything on the screen, every orange box on the screen is an API call. So that's an integration into our core systems within a service registry task in Flowable directly. The gray boxes are error handling. The sort of the teal boxes are user interactions. And then the dark blue are forms generation or document generation. So this best practice came into place because we have a whole bunch of people touching these now that may not necessarily always know what they're, might not have the experience in there. So by color coding them, makes it really easy to see the different components of the workflow. But the big thing that was important here is the reason that this has been successful is the integration in our API layer. So our APIs are really sort of the foundational element that allow us to be so successful with our Flowable integrations. We have a large API library, and because of that, It makes it really easy to do subsequent development because we don't need, subsequent workflow development because we don't have to do API development to make it happen. So looking at this workflow, you can see set all those orange boxes. Actually, only one of them was required to be net new for this process. So we didn't have our industry code lookup. So that was as simple as going to our development team and adding that in. But the rest of the ones that you see there were already in our library, and they're just simply configured by the person doing the workflow. So at this point, I'm going to pass it over to Tim, and he's going to take you through the next step in the process.
Thanks, Jeff. Hi, I'm Tim Miller-Dick, the technical architect at Kindred Credit Union. Jeff outlined earlier the process flow improvements that we found when we switched to having business unit flowable designers. I'd like to tell you now about the specific business benefits that we have experienced, the challenges and difficulties we faced along the way, and what has worked for us to address those challenges. I hope that you will find useful takeaways from our lived experience that will help you in your own organizations. As we have gained experience, not just with Flowable, but with the big concept of business process reengineering using business process modeling, we've found it very helpful across the organization to have as much workflow literacy as we can. The concept that a business process itself is expressed in BPM notation and turned into a digital runnable version of that business process is a very powerful concept. The workflow design is code. So here are some of the many benefits we have found by fostering workflow design literacy at Kindred Credit Union in a sustained and systematic way. Some of our workflow designers are very active in workflow design and are the primary developers of multiple workflows for their business units. Because they are not IT staff, but work directly in their own business units, workflow designers intimately know the problem space the workflow is automating. They have years of experience in the business area and were often frontline staff themselves. They know exactly how the current business process works, what its required inputs are, and what the current pain points are. They know how to design interfaces and structure steps the optimal way, given the requirements of the task at hand. They are very motivated to help their business unit accomplish its goals quickly, such as delivering on a core hours of work saved objective that Kindred Credit Union leadership sets each year for the whole organization. And they love that they don't have to wait for anyone in IT, such as a software developer, to do something before they can get started. They can get to work immediately. And the benefits extend out beyond there. We have other workflow designers that spend less time actively doing design work, but are still involved in many ways. For example, they are assisting in workflow design, such as handling simpler functional changes or making user enhancements to forms. They're performing user acceptance testing of a workflow developed by one of their business unit colleagues. They're assisting in triage and analysis of user workflow help desk tickets. For example, is this a workflow bug? Is it a data error? Is it an API error? Is it a simple end user error? They cover for other workflow developers who are busy with other things or on vacation. They take over as a maintainer of an existing stable workflow because of a staffing change. They develop end user documentation on how to use the workflow, carrying out user training with end user staff, such as frontline staff, responding to end user feedback about the workflow, or even just viewing a workflow to understand the exact implementation of the business process as expressed in BPMN. So we found at almost any level of workflow design expertise, having a level of workflow design literacy makes our staff more effective. Now, Jeff mentioned earlier our decision to grow our capacity by enabling and empowering business process experts who are not professional software developers to be workflow designers. So we found that our three main challenges have been around helping non-IT professionals gain enough technical skills to accomplish, mostly on their own, a task that would be often, in some organizations, assigned to IT staff. So the first challenge is around core workflow design skills. Now, this certainly includes competence in using Flowable design and Flowable inspect as tools, but even more so, how business process modeling works in the first place. Designers need to understand available Flowable data types and data structures. They also need to learn our internal data models and some internal aspects of our banking system and other systems of record as they are interacting with these systems at the API level now. They need to learn the types of Flowable form controls available and which are best suited for what purposes. They need to understand API calls they can use and their inputs and outputs. They need to understand Flowable front-end and back-end expressions and the difference between these two and how to read and write both types of expressions. The second big challenge is learning to think like a developer. As I just mentioned, a workflow is code, and workflow development best practices are software development best practices. So workflow designers need to understand software development concepts like variables, data types, data structures, arrays, and objects, all expressed in JSON notation. They need to know how to handle nulls and zeros, empty strings, and other special data values. They need to consider refactoring to reduce duplication. They need to strongly validate user input and anticipate, catch, and properly handle errors. They need to design interfaces that are usable, communicate effectively with the user, and enable the user to accomplish their tasks faster, better, and more accurately than before. The third challenge is for workflow designers to address ongoing workflow support. So as Jeff mentioned, we've been using Flowable for about 3 years now. And as workflow designers ship more new workflows, well, they also have more existing workflows to support. There is, as is typical, a long tail of user support and feature requests for many months as workflows become established as critical business infrastructure. We need to enable the rest of the organization's support mechanism to take on this task and not just leave it to one person, the original designer. As such, the workflow designer needs to document and explain new workflows to our IT operations team, help desk staff, and to others connected to supporting the production workflow deployment. They need to hand off support to the regular IT end user support channel. Workflows are business critical infrastructure, and we support them at multiple levels: local site escalation, regular help desk tickets, business unit escalation, service desk escalation, and so on up our regular support paths. Some of our workflows automate processes that previously had been using paper forms. Once the workflow gets established, staff get rid of the paper forms. There is no paper to go back to. So those are challenges. Here are some specific solutions that we found worked for us. At the very beginning of our work with Flowable, we had in-person classroom-style training led by Flowable and also by our own staff. This covered essential concepts like the use of Flowable design, workflow design objects, and what is a REST API. We also addressed Kindred-specific items like an understanding of how workflow security is configured in our environment, our approach to setting up security rights for our development, our test, and our production environments, and an understanding of how the Kindred IT change management process works and how to successfully navigate a change through the change management process and all the way into production. We also saved some of these internal training videos for staff to watch later. However, we found that once we got over that initial hurdle, we moved away from classroom style training. Instead, what we have moved to is investing more in shared resources that our designers can use at any time, more on-demand things, and also to one-on-one coaching. So some examples of the things that we did that worked for us is we created a Workflow Designers Wiki. We actually use a shared Microsoft OneNote notebook for this. And this contains shared documentation like step-by-step instructions to start a workflow, instructions on standardized workflow design patterns, how-to documents on using various Flowable design workflow and form objects with examples and things to watch out for, and also many worked out examples of front-end and back-end expressions with common use cases available for copy-paste use. We also have open API documentation so designers can see our API catalog with all the available API methods and documentations on what they do, these APIs do, and also what their inputs and outputs are. However, through the use of pre-built Flowable objects, the API layer that we have is much more accessible than it would otherwise be. Our software developers are responsible for creating Flowable service registry definitions for all of our API methods. And this provides a pre-built API definitions that designers can just select within Flowable Design, and Flowable Design's own UI then shows them directly the available API methods and the input and output variables. We also have pre-built complete workflows that can be used as sub-processes. For example, we have sub-processes to implement e-signature, to send email, to send an SMS text, and other common shared tasks. We have pre-built smaller components as well, such as individual shared forms and workflow fragments that designers can just copy from. Our pre-built shared Kindred workflow security policy is something that just all our workflows use as is. One of the things we learned is that designers just started looking at each other's work on our Flowable development server to see how their colleagues had accomplished tasks and to start learning from each other. For interactive support, we have a real-time chat group that designers can use to post questions for quick, immediate help. We also have a more structured monthly designer meeting that my colleague Jeff mentioned earlier. Finally, designers mentor and provide ongoing support for each other. Initially, the very first group of workflow designers were IT software developers. However, workflow designers are now almost all business unit staff that provide one-on-one training and mentoring to their colleagues who are newer to workflow designs. We help each other with thorny issues or just swap ideas on how to solve a design problem in Flowable. We don't have a hard separation between workflow designers and IT developers. Both communicate regularly on an ongoing basis, and IT developers sometimes do workflow development. However, we have reached a point where the large majority of workflow design is handled by workflow designers, and IT developers mostly are working at the Kindred API layer and below. We have been successful at greatly broadening the pool of workflow development talent at Kindred Credit Union. You see here a month-by-month chart showing shipments of new workflow designs into our production environment. During our first year, you can see that very few workflows got into production. We had only IT staff as workflow designers and not much workflow knowledge or workflow thinking as an organization. However, we have seen a steady increase of workflow and business process automation delivery to the business. As our workflow designers group grew in size and in expertise, more and more business units began developing their own new workflow designs. You can see how more and more months had 2 or 3 or even more new workflow designs going into production as time passed. And here we have the same chart, or a different chart, pardon me, but showing the same data, just grouped on a calendar year basis. And you can see that overall, we are about doubling our delivery rate each year. The 2023 data is just up to July, and as of that point, we had already almost matched all of 22 deliveries while being just halfway through this year. And this is our ultimate goal. As mentioned briefly before, we have a mandate from leadership in our yearly organizational goals to repurpose a large number of hours each year from existing work into freed up staff time. And here are specific examples from 4 workflows showing staff time savings per year. These are new hours freed up by our workflow process automation and by the work of our Flowable designers. And these hours are newly available to spend more time serving our members and on new initiatives. In conclusion, it's been a very successful initiative for us to create a staff workflow designers group. We have discovered and nurtured previously hidden talent in our workforce to design and build highly functional, reliable, and accurate workflows across our business units. We have more code from more people across the business. We have more development productivity, resulting in a positive feedback loop with more automation happening more quickly. We have more deliverables to more areas of the business. And we have become more agile and spend more time on what is most important right now without compromising our many operational responsibilities. That's the end of our presentation. Yeah, we're happy to.
Fantastic. I mean, I learned more there than I did even previewing your slides before. That was fantastic. I know that Rob would be proud of you after all the talk that he had previously in his presentation about Kindred Credit Union. But you know, we've got a little bit of time left here. We've got several questions that have come in. I think you'll be able to go through these and answer these without any problems whatsoever. So let me go through a few for you, Tim and Jeff, and we'll see how we can answer these for everybody. One of the questions that came in says, assuming the designers were team members before they started being citizen developers, did they have to sacrifice other duties to take on these new tasks?
I would say it's true in a lot of cases that some of the work has been shifted, but especially when you look at the time savings as a whole, especially, you know, the slide Tim just showed, we look at where we're repurposing our hours. So we're taking time away from some of the work that they might have been spending on as a result of prior manual processes, and we're redeploying it into the area of workflow design. Perfect.
Fantastic. Another question. We'll try and get through as many of these as we can, obviously, but there's quite a few in here. So did you guys limit any functionality for the citizen developer, and how did you do it if so?
So no, in the sense of we use every part of Flowable that we can to automate our work. The big gating factor is that we exclusively use APIs to interact with our line of business systems. And as mentioned, those are through Flowable service registries. So our designers use Flowable registry tasks 100% to interact with anything outside of Flowable. So that allows us to have our overall API layer provide another layer of security, audit, compliance, error checks, error responses, logging, structuring and transforming of data. So it does a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of making sure that things are safe, as safe as we can. I mean, we also are involved in making sure that workflows are looked at by multiple people and tested, go through design, test, production, change management, all those things. But really the key one was having a unified API layer that all the designers can pick from, like a catalog or a library of APIs. And that provides kind of the safe and managed interface to all our core business banking systems of various kinds, of which there are many that we interact with from Flowable.
All right. Fantastic on that one. And I know that some slides came up around challenges, and there's a few questions around challenges in implementing. What do you see as were the biggest challenges in implementing the citizen developer approach within Kindred Credit Union, and really to get acceptance internally also?
I think it was Tim mentioned as part of the process, we didn't always have this as the way that we were doing things. We started out with IT developers doing our Flowable design. And so first of all, when we started to transition out of there, it's trying to find the right people to do the design. I mean, we've had success in all areas of the business with people of all experience doing design, but obviously there are some people that have more of a knack for it and pick it up a lot easier than others. So it's about trying to balance sort of the natural aptitude that somebody might have and their interest in joining the sort of the design team. But the big thing being is, as people are learning, they're not as efficient as a seasoned developer. So one of the things that we had to often trade off with is time spent allowing people to learn it and then meeting project timelines. So it was kind of hard for some of our IT staff at times to be hands off and say, okay, we'll let you learn your way through it a little bit, but it's going to be a trade-off because you're learning here. It might push our project a little bit. So we invested in educating our teams rather than just kind of the sort of more traditional IT approach and pushing the development all through a much smaller channel. The other big consideration that's always and something that we continue to struggle with is standardization in our design process. Because we have so many different people doing this development, we really need to be on top of creating best practices and sharing them throughout the organization so that they don't all look like they're designed by different people. We need that if somebody's going to go in there for maintenance or picking out that up later, that each of our workflows look similar to one another so that we can share and learn from that. And that's something that we're continuing to struggle with, but we work on regularly.
All right, we continue to get questions coming in, so I'm going to try and get through these. We've got approximately 5 minutes left here, so I will try and get through a few more here. One that I find intriguing from my standpoint is having a sales team that's out there selling Flowable always is do you have any recommendations for a customer which would like to implement the same approach that Kindred Credit Union has done?
Sure. Just do it. Not to be flippant, but we just jumped in. As Jeff mentioned, once we started investing in our business staff and helping them gain the technical skills, there were definitely some people who loved it. Like, it was just such an enablement for them. And they had the business knowledge, they had the aptitude, they knew where the pain was. It was a great meshing of business need and business knowledge with the technical skills, and of course the tools and the infrastructure we have on the technical side. So just starting to do it and finding gems. Like I mentioned, we found so much hidden talent that we never would have discovered in our business units in terms of skillful, accurate, technically competent workflow design. We never would have found that if we hadn't tried. So I would say just start with a few people. I think they kind of emerge if given the opportunity. You pair motivation and business knowledge with some technical skills and some opportunity, some coaching, some chances to share and learn from each other, and magic happens.
You know, that falls right in line with another question that came up, Tim. And you may have just answered it, but I'm going to ask it again because I think there's some different approach. But how do you find those business people willing to implement an application within Kindred Credit Union?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit because this is now deployed throughout our organization. I think you'd be hard pressed to find anybody at Kindred that doesn't have some sort of hand in Flowable, not necessarily development, but at least a use case. So they sort of self-select to an extent, but also we're out there promoting it on a regular basis, so everybody has an opportunity to see it. And we try to encourage people to participate if they want to put up their hand, say, hey, I want to learn more about Flowable. How can I get involved? And that's, we'll extend them an invite to our user group meeting so they can kind of dip their toe in the water, get used to it, kind of see what the other side of the Flowable process looks like, as opposed to just from the user perspective. But also having that peer mentorship. So with designers in all areas of the business, there's somebody that they can talk to and assess whether or not it's something that they might want to do. And then the other big thing is we allow our development server to be accessed by anyone. If somebody asks, we'll give them permission. It's really hard to break anything in there, and they can kind of explore for themselves, see if they're interested. And if they get in there, they find it interesting and intriguing, and they've developed some skill at it, then they can continue to work at their own pace. We don't have to handhold them through it. We've got a lot of resources, as Tim mentioned, that we pre-recorded training sessions and things like that. They can self-serve, and we've got our peer group. So if somebody wants to ask questions, they're always there for it, and we're happy to have as many developers or designers participate as we can. There's always a need for more.
Always a need for more, right? And I've always seen that in everywhere we go. That's one of the things that always comes up, is you're always looking for more once you start utilizing Flowable and et cetera, move forward. But there's multiple questions in here that are similar. So I'm going to read off just a couple here and we'll kind of combine them together. But they're talking about measuring, and how do you measure numbers of workflows implemented? Have you attempted to measure the value of the automation? And, and along with that, and another question, how did you measure your added benefit by implementing Flowable, and how remarkable were the optimizations? I think we touched on that a little bit in the presentation, but an example would be like 30% less manual work or 50% faster processing, et cetera. So I'll stop there. There's more questions that are similar to that, but how do you measure results? Essentially, what people are looking for.
Yeah, we totally do. We invest energy in accurately measuring outputs like this. I mentioned we have a global goal of repurposing hours to serve our members better and new initiatives. It's a big target. It was like 12 or 15,000. Like it's a lot every year, and Flowable is a key part of that, along with other things we do around automation. So the business units are responsible for delivering on that, and so everyone is at Kindred. So once you find a candidate process, I mentioned, we have some that are paper-based, they get automated. People will measure the actual time it takes to go through the process without automation, the old way, and then we'll do it with Flowable, which eliminates tons of steps. And of course, we have API automation going on as well. You measure how long that takes, and then you multiply by the number of times that we do that task per year, which we know. And so it's carefully counted, and we're focused on the things that have the biggest deliverable for us to meet our targets.
Fantastic. Well, we've got a couple minutes left. I'll try and get through one more question here. Last question that we'll ask here is, do you make use of event streams, channels in your workflows, event to trigger processes, or to identify that certain steps have been complete, et cetera?
Yeah, we don't, although that's something we're definitely looking into, because there's some processes that are a good use case for event bus type approaches. So we use we use either batch or asynchronous processing, synchronous, and it's all REST APIs or timers. We do use timers a fair amount, either like kind of events, but not an event bus that will trigger a REST API call at a certain time, or Flowable timers that will trigger certain things. But an event bus is still something that would be good, and we're looking into that.
The one thing I will say is we do use the sort of overnight processing logic to kick off workflows in a lot of cases. So, for example, we have an overdraft workflow in development right now where if an account over the course of our overnight processing is identified as being an overdraft, it calls an API to kick off a workflow and then it's handled through that. So we are sort of fudging that in a sense. We're kind of getting there, but not in Flowable directly.
Fantastic. I do have one more, and we'll get through it very, very fast. And then obviously one thing, I mean, you're staring at a screen with comments and questions, and you see Tim and Jeff's email addresses on there. They gracefully put those on there. I'm sure they would be more than happy to answer questions, or they wouldn't have put their email addresses on there. So if we didn't get to your question, I apologize, but we will, I'm sure they'll be happy to answer them. But the last question is, how do you technical problems? Does the technical team need to be involved?
Sure, if needed. I mean, we have a normal escalation process. Sometimes it's a business issue. Sometimes it's end user training. It goes through the help desk. We have escalation up business expertise paths, and then we have escalation up technical paths. So it's the same as any other automation system we have at Kindred, and definitely these are operational systems. We have to support them 100%, and we do.
All right. Well, fantastic. Thank you both, Tim and Jeff, for being here on FlowFest 2023 this year. And Kindred Credit Union, like I said, is a fantastic customer. We really enjoy having them as a customer of Flowable, and look forward to possibly having you again on here in the future, Tim and Jeff. I appreciate it, and thank you very much.